Energy consultant Charles Majomi joins me now via Skype from Abuja to look critically at this very important sector. Charles, it's great to have you join us on the show.
Thank you. Good to
Charles,
be here.
Charles, before we start talking basically on gas flaring, I want to touch on what the GMD said earlier this week at a conference in Lagos, saying Nigeria is going to actually bridge this refining gap. We're going to reduce importation of petroleum products as soon as possible. How feasible is that to you as a player in the sector?
Well, I think what the GMD was probably alluding to is the fact that the current system whereby we import petroleum, refined petroleum products and export crude oil, what they call under recovery, used to be called subsidy, has to come to an end. And in order to do that, we're going to have to add value to our crude oil resources locally, whether that be, and that is in refining the crude oil and bringing out the products from it. Similarly, this is, I think, whether the issue of correcting the refineries, if I may say so, is not brain surgery. It's something that, if there is real government will to do so, can happen. This is not the first time a group managing director or a member of government has said they're going to correct refineries. Usually what we see following such statements is award of contracts for refurbishment of refineries that never get refurbished. I think it's too early to condemn the statement of GMD to what we've perennially seen coming from government with respect to repairing the refineries. But like I said, it's not brain surgery. If we develop our capacity locally or upgrade our installed capacity, we'll certainly be able to refine and produce PMS for us, petroleum for ourselves. So I take him at his word. It's a very positive thing to say. It's something that needs to be done.
Interesting. Charles, let's now look at gas flaring, which is also another angle to this when it comes to flaring of gas, millions of dollars being burnt away, health hazards, and all of that. We've had dates, we've set deadlines before now, but we've never been able to meet up. What is responsible for this?
What, for not meeting up? Or
yes.
For, I think one of the key incentives to flaring gas has to be the penalties that you would pay if you didn't, if you continue to flare them. In the past, the penalty was so small and as to be inconsequential to the gas flarer. So it was actually, when it was about 10 cents per million standard cubic feet of gas, a producer of oil who flares gas as associated gas would rather pay that penalty than engage in activities towards monetizing the gas, since it's not their core business. What's perhaps more credible this time around about the potential for monetizing this gas is that last year, the Ministry of Petroleum put forward a gas regulation, a new gas regulation to the president, whereby the penalties for gas would be increased substantially to about $2.50 per million standard cubic feet of gas. This has substantially disincentivized those who would continue to flare gas, as it now becomes very, very expensive to do so, which I think will help the program because now you have the international oil companies being more cooperative with respect to providing access to that gas flare so that third-party qualified technical parties can actually monetize that gas flare and turn them into value for the government and for private industry and for the communities where those flares are, because adding value to that gas flare, monetizing them, creates value chains of employment and substantially positively impacts on local GDP and growth.
Charles, let's talk about this commercialization of gas, which remains very important for a country like Nigeria that relies solely on proceeds from crude oil. I've had opportunities to speak with members of the Nigerian Gas Association, and they maintain that we don't have the right framework, pricing, environment. Lots of challenges are facing these guys running this business, the big boys. They are not ready to do this business because they say it's really not profitable. How does this come to you?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure who you're talking to. There is, in my view, no reason why monetizing gas in a country as large as Nigeria, where there are clear markets for the products that would come from monetizing that gas, exist. Whether it's LPG, cooking gas, whether it's providing gas to power, whether it's creating petrochemicals from that gas. I think the key issue here is defining the nature of the Nigerian market vis-a-vis gas. You know, there's this kind of like colonial overhang that exists over the oil and gas industry where something is only viable if you do an economic model that sees a European, Middle Eastern, or Far East Asian off-taker for your products. It's like we don't exist as market off-takers of our own products, even though clearly we are a market of people with wants. So I think before we make a statement like that, I think it's very important to understand the size of Nigeria as a market for its own products, and to look at things not from an export-based point of view, like a lot of the oil companies do, but from a regional market-based point of view. And I think if you were to do that and you analyze the data correctly, you will find that producing products for the local market is would be extremely profitable. That's not to say that there aren't issues. I mean, there are issues surrounding correct pricing of the gas. I think you have to get that one right. There are issues, and I think the gas flare program seeks to do so by establishing that there's a minimum of 25 cents per million standard cubic feet. And if you see a value beyond that, you can bid for the particular utilization that you're contemplating and adjust your pricing to meet what it is you want to do with that gas accordingly. There are also issues of evacuation. There are issues of FX differentials. If your off-takers are paying you in naira, but you're buying your hardware to process the gas in dollars, what happens when there's a drastic fall in the price of the naira? So there are some issues there, but I think with a careful approach, they can be taken care of. I wanted to add that the kind of amount of gas that we're flaring currently, okay, is so large, it's equivalent to about 3 billion meters cubed per day of gas. Puts us at about like the number 6 largest flarer in the world, behind countries like Russia and the United States. But it's important to note that those countries flare gas, but their flares are productive flares. They're creating industry. They're flares that come from industry. They're flares that come from productive activities. Ours are just flares that come from producing oil and flaring it because there's nothing else that we can do with it. And this one is actually more damaging because it's an economic value that's evaporating, that's equal to about 3.5 million fuel for 3.5 million cars per day. So you can imagine the kind of economic value that this government or this country has squandered in the past. It's a resource, there's money in it. Absolutely, it should be explored, the kinks ironed out, and the gas monetized.
All right, Charles Majomi, thank you very much. Thanks for agreeing that there are challenges actually in the sector if we really need to get it right and harness the potentials of Nigeria's gas industry. Charles Majomi is an energy consultant. He joined us live from Abuja, bearing his mind on gas flaring and how we can put a stop to that. Let's take a break, and when we return, we have more for you. Don't go away. It's Business Nigeria.